Hey everyone, Molly here from A Drink with Monty. On today's podcast, we speak with two amazing women. They are both fighting the fight against mental health issues and awareness for first responders. Dr. Nancy Wesselink, the founder and chief consultant of One Source Counseling and Employee Assistance Services, and Irma Christie, who is the owner and operator of Irma Christie Counseling, sat down with us virtually to discuss some of the issues they see every day while working with first responders, their employers, and their families. Jon and I loved speaking with them. We hope to do some work with them in the future. We learned a lot, and we hope you guys learned something too and enjoy it.
Miss Irma, tell us about what it is that you guys do and how you got started.
Okay, I'll go first if that's okay, Irma.
Yeah.
So I, back in 1994, a call went out from the city of Atlanta. What it was at the time was the Internal Psych Bureau of the city of Atlanta, asking for mental health clinicians to come down and prepare for the Olympics. They knew they were going to need some extra hands, and so kind of a call went out around the metro area. I thought it sounded pretty interesting. I was living in Marietta at the time and had just, had just gotten my master's in social work from UGA. So I just graduated. So I went down and I met some of the mental health people that were working for the city. And for 2 years, it was a real immersive situation of getting to know the emergency ops from the ground up. So I literally had hands-on with everything from Secret Service all the way down to the beat cop and everything in between. It was an amazing, organized chaos, if you will. But I really learned a lot just by hanging around and watching things. So I did get a call to the bombing. So I did respond to that. And that was my first real hands-on critical incident. And that was a huge first critical incident. So again, I learned a lot more from just experiencing that. So after that, I was hired by the city. And I stayed there until 2001. And throughout the time I was there, I did over 80 ride-alongs. I witnessed a lot of really hard things, but a lot of really great things as well. And so I made myself get out there and just learn as much as I could learn about the public safety parts of the city of Atlanta. So along the way, I worked for some external employee assistance programs. I became a provider on their panels, seeing their clients and finding out that the services for public safety personnel and their families was pretty much non-existent. And unfortunately, that's still the case today, I think. And so in 2002, I took $100 out of my wallet, my last $100, and I said, I'm going to start this company and I'm going to just see where it takes me. And so that was 18 years ago. So throughout that time, I made sure that I kept learning and kept experiencing, kept doing ride-alongs. And so it just made sense for me to really focus on those services for those particular employees that were so in need. And the stigma back then, and I know y'all have been around long enough to know, was really bad. So it was a lot of uphill fight to make it okay to see a counselor. So the trust issues were huge. That was a big deal. I went out, I did a lot of presentations, just a lot of information so that people would know what I was doing.
That's awesome. Now today, how big is your company reach? You're obviously outside of the city, just the city of Atlanta, but how far does your company reach now?
Well, I consult pretty much all over the state when I need to, usually by telephone or, some other easy way to get in touch. But primarily I'm in the metro area, the 5-county metro area. I have contracts with several governments and municipalities, but I also have NGO contracts, non-governmental organizations. And so the beauty of that is that the non-government organizations pay really well on their contracts that allows me to be able to go out and do some of this. Voluntary is really the best way I can call it. and that way we're not hurt financially by it. So yeah, and we have, we probably have maybe 4,000 covered employees and family altogether if you counted everybody. And the vast majority are, like I said, they're public safety people, police, fire, 911, EMS, and dispatch. So through the years, I've become a mental health professional for a lot of CISM teams, critical incident stress management teams throughout the metro area. Gwinnett PD is one. They're just kind of everywhere, and they are always in need of MHPs that can accompany them on their peer support programs and things of that nature. So I still stay really active with a lot of them. And of course, putting my own company together, I formed my own panel of counselors. I made sure that I interviewed these people, that I vetted them, that I got to know them personally and professionally, because I decided if I'm going to put this together, it's going to be worthy of these individuals and their families. And these counselors are going to have to know what they're doing. So I literally interviewed each counselor that I talked to. And if they said they had no public safety experience, I moved on to the next one. So that's how that kind of got built over time.
That's awesome. Speaking of counselors with public safety experience, Irma, tell us a little bit about you and what you do and your experience.
Sure. Well, back in early 2000, I was an EMT over in California, which is originally where I'm from. And that's actually how I met my husband, was in EMT class. And I did that for a while, and we got married and, had a baby, got a home, all the usual stuff. And the job wasn't conducive for having a family, especially two people in the household. So I went back to my former profession of being a dental assistant with the idea of going back to school. I had always wanted to be a counselor, wanted to do it since I was 18 years old. And, during this time, my husband was going through the hiring process, which is very scary out there. You get 500 openings and 20,000 people apply for the fire department out there. So we packed up and moved out here back in 2004. And my husband was working for 911 dispatch with Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. And he did that for about a year, and then it opened up on the fire side. And so he applied there, went to school and all that for fire science technology. And so during this time, I'm in school. So we're out here, we're in our house, I'm in school to be a counselor. And I finished up school, let's say 2014. And right out of school, I opened up a private practice in Cumming. And, during all this, I could see just with my own personal experience with my husband, I was picking up on body language and things when he would come home off shift. And I could tell, especially while I'm in grad school for this, that there's some things going on, so I would, talk to him about it. And, we'd kind of work through whatever it was. And so I guess you could say he was kind of my guinea pig while I was in school. And so after I started my practice, I see just the general populations, 17 on up, for various issues. But along the way with the old supervisor of mine, she knew Nancy, and they had a conversation, and Nancy was like, I really need to meet her. So Nancy and I got together and we talked about, her business, and we talked about mine. And I just kind of told her where my heart was, which was with obviously public safety community. And so I went ahead and got on a panel with her and started seeing if she sends people my way, I see them. And really just through word of mouth, I have people that come in now that have just heard me through somebody else, and they come in and it works out quite well, like Nancy was describing with her business. It works quite well with mine because I take, two insurance companies, and I have a lot of self-pay clientele. So it really makes up for when my public safety people come in, because it's so important to me that they get in and that it's not a financial strain on the family. So I always see them at a reduced rate.
So tell us about the process of actually becoming a patient. I know that from an outsider looking in, that's probably the hardest part. Number one is accepting that you have a problem or there is a problem, and then two, where to go. Um, I've said it once and I'll say it again. I would never be the person that finds a business card off a refrigerator and looks at it and is like, you know what, I'm going to call this number. I don't think I would do that, even if I was in my darkest hour. It just wouldn't cross my mind. It would be the person that comes to me and says, hey, I noticed a change. Why don't you reach out to this person? That would be the kind of person that I would call. So tell us about the process and go into how they become a patient and the communication you guys have with departments, their department and insurance, and kind of how that works out.
Okay, it's easy if we can get a contract. That's the easiest way to do it, because I do the orientations and I talk about what we can do.
A contract with the department that they, or the company they work for?
The contract with the municipality or the government. I call it a behavioral health service, a BHS. It's an EAP, but I slightly changed the title just a little bit. And so the contract allows for a certain amount of sessions that each family member gets at no charge to them. And so we contract with the companies based on what the services are that they want. And we have like a line item charge for each of those services. So the bigger the county, the bigger the price, because you've got more employees. I also learned the hard way that 3-session models actually do more damage. People that only get 3 sessions, and then they either have to drop or pay or go on insurance. In my experience as a mental health practitioner, I still have a private practice on the side. By the 3rd session, you're just getting to know who you're in front of. And to me, it's more dangerous to say, now we've got to change our treatment model. And you're going to have to start paying something. And so I came up with the 6 to 8 model. We have 6 sessions to 8 sessions that we offer, no less. And so if they want to pay for 6, the county gets 6. That's fine. But I just think that you've got to get enough time with a counselor to get the trust, to get the confidentiality piece in place. There's a lot of teaching on trust. There's a lot of teaching on utilization, because if the county's paying for something, they want to know it's being used. And I get that. And so when we go out and do our orientations and we tell the leadership, the chiefs, the HR folks, we tell them, here's how this works. If I'm the one-stop shop, I get all the phone calls, and that sounds crazy, but I'm not overwhelmed. We don't have enough business really for me to have to worry about not being able to cover the intake. So I take the first call and I walk them through, this is how it works. I get your name, where you work, and what you're looking for. Because it could be anything. It could be my 12-year-old needs some help. My kid in college needs some help. My wife is starting to take a little too much, of her pills that she's been on. Anything. I've got to get an understanding of what they're grappling with. So, and it could be a family member. It may not be a police officer or a firefighter per se, but I got to figure out what's going on with them. So I'll take a good 30 minutes just to talk to them about what their issues are and why they're asking for help. Then I'm circulating in my mind what's going to really be of benefit for them. If they're firefighters, I want them to go see a firefighter specific counselor or a public safety counselor, someone who has that education and that knowledge. So I've been very lucky to find that handful of people, and they are scattered around the metro area. And they're also doing telehealth, which opens up another avenue of connection. So I will tell that person, here's who you need to call. And I'll text them Almost always they want to be texted, so it's on their phones, the name, the location, and the phone number of the counselor. Then I email the counselor with their name, who they work for, how many sessions they're eligible for, and what they're looking for in counseling. And that authorizes the counselor to do those sessions, send me the bill, and the clients go at no fee. So that's how that works.
Now, in this situation, they have to reach out to their superiors in order to get in contact with you. How does that work?
Never. We make sure that the number that they call is my number. Okay. We're talking about voluntary requests. This is someone who has a personal issue unrelated to the job. And I would say, and I think Irma would probably agree, the vast majority of what we see are voluntary people who are just grappling with something that they need help with, financial, physical, emotional, whatever it is, relational, but it's not connected to what they do when they're on duty. So that is completely and totally between them, me, and the counselor. And we also operate under the same HIPAA rules as medical doctors. I tell people that all the time. Nothing leaves the counselor's office without their express written consent, and only under specific circumstances, which brings up the idea of sending someone because they have had a work issue. So let me just clarify that confidentiality piece, because that's a little confusing to people. Let's say, for an example, a firefighter shows up to work at 6 a.m. and they smell alcohol on his breath. So they know he's been drinking. He admits it, or he admits that he drank until 2 a.m, stayed out too late. So we have a policy violation. That requires, what I want to call it from now on, is an automatic referral. I don't like mandated. That's used way too much in my industry, and it's very punitive, and it sounds like they're being punished. So what I like to say is it's an automatic referral for an assessment. They can't stay at work, they're impaired. Someone will need to get them to the counselor pretty quickly. So as soon as I get that phone call, I'm trying to find 1 or 2 counselors that I know can see them in the next, well, at least hopefully that day. I've been real lucky in that aspect. They will go and get their assessment. Now, since they have a job issue, the confidentiality is breached because they know that they have a drinking issue on the job. Everybody knows that now, including HR. But let's say in the context of talking to that counselor, they find out that their wife was having an affair with someone and they were drinking to try to get to sleep. No way will we ever share that. No way will they ever know that that's the reason maybe that they started the drinking. What they will get, and what my counselors they train to do this, is they will get back in touch with their employer, HR, the chief, whoever that point of contact is, and they'll say, he's coming, he's compliant, and he's following my treatment recommendations. He's good to come back to work. That's all they will get.
So Irma, when patients come to you, what is the process? Obviously they're I don't want to say vetted, but they call Nancy, and you have your own patients as well. You said that don't go through Nancy. What kind of screening process do you do, and what are the next steps that you take to get those patients in or their family in, and what is your process?
Well, if they have my number, they can call me. I'm the one that answers the phone. They're not going to get somebody else. I'm a one-stop shop as well. So, and I think it goes a long way. So they call me, and usually if it's someone coming in through Nancy, or really honestly public safety in general, doesn't have to come through her. It could just be someone that shows up on their own and calls me. I work really hard to get them in the same week. They need to be in, because my line of thinking is if they called me, they're ready to come in, and I don't want to lose that window. So I don't want to give them too much time to think about maybe canceling or being okay a week later. So we, I get them in. It's a 50-minute appointment. We go over, what we call informed consent, in the office, just kind of talking about, confidentiality and things that would have to be reported, which is the same for all, like what you all have to do in public safety, we have to do as counselors, the child abuse and elderly abuse and all of that stuff, talking about all that. things that need to be reported. And I let them know right up front, I take notes for treatment planning. They're for me. No one has access to them but me. They're written in a way that if for some weird, crazy reason someone saw them, they would have no idea what I was talking about. I assure them it's in the locked cabinet. None of that information is relayed to their employer. If anybody were to call to ask if they were even coming in to see me, they're not going to get an answer. I don't have anything signed by the client saying that, you can talk to this person or that person. So that, no releases are signed. No one's going to know they're even coming in. And we have in my office in particular, and I love this little extra safety feature, but we have a keypad code on our door. And I really like this for my public safety people, because the morning of their appointment, they get the code, they come in, and wait for me to call them back. But we don't have any solicitors. We don't have anybody just randomly walking in and out of our office, where if they're really concerned that someone's going to see them, it's not going to happen, because I do have some people that are on duty that come in, and they'll be in full uniform. So I like that extra piece that we have going on at my office. But we just talk about, if they're coming in through Nancy, through EAP, because some of them will start to get panicked by the third or fourth session, like, things are going really well. They like coming in, they feel like they're getting things accomplished, and they're kind of like, oh, I've only got, a couple sessions left. And so I let them know at that point. I said, look, this is how we do it. I take Cigna, I take Aetna. If you have one of those insurance companies, you can use them if you want to. Most of my people say no, because they don't even want a record that they came in to see me. And I understand that, because there is a real fear there that their job will be compromised. So I assure them that we don't have to go through insurance. If you don't want to do that, we don't have to do that. So I reduce the fee. So they just pay a really low fee to come in. And then they can continue their counseling. And usually that's a big relief for them, because they know once they finish up with their 6 sessions, they'll just continue. More often than not, they stay, and they continue coming in for counseling. But once we get all that squared away, it seems to really help them determine that, okay, this is what I want to keep doing.
Hearing that a common theme and knowing that it's a common theme of departments and people looking down on employees that seek help. I mean, it honestly, it really does make me, it pisses me off really bad. That's so ridiculous. That is so old school, and it just doesn't work. And it's proven that it doesn't work. And I just, it just flies all over me.
I think a lot of, and we've talked about this before, and we talk about it all the time, a lot of that is just awareness. And a lot of it is educating people on, the benefits of help, and how it can potentially be a snowball effect if you don't get help and try to hold it in. Nancy talks about the stigma, and how, it is a problem, and it is an uphill battle, but like what you ladies are doing, I think education and awareness, and that is all going to be, the change that we need to see in that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too, administratively, is my goal is to reach leadership. Mm-hmm. And again, everything that I talk about is really more either my experience or my thinking that things logically are kind of happening this way, but it's hard for the leadership to grasp the concept of counseling if they came up in the old school world of suck it up, buttercup. That worked for them, and y'all know this. When you look at the retired guys or the older veterans, they're crusty old veterans, and they learned long ago that that's how you survive your job. So turning that into something else is very, very difficult for them. They don't trust it. They don't feel like it's necessary. And so the hardest part, I think, of our job clinically is to, like Molly said, to educate and create awareness from the top down, which is In some agencies, it's great. There's three types. There's one that will talk the talk, but they won't walk the walk. There's one that will walk the walk, but they won't talk the talk. And there's the ones that actually walk the talk. And so I'm hoping as younger people are coming up into those leadership positions, your lieutenants, your captains, your battalion chiefs, your majors, those folks are now taking these leadership positions. I'm hoping that organically we will see these agencies embrace clinicians. And the visibility, like you said, is huge, Jon. We need to be out there. We need to be visible. We need to do ride-alongs like the chaplains do. The other critical piece is being that mental health professional that can go out on peer support. Because if the agency's not going to buy into a clinician, doing counseling, they'll buy into somebody helping them with a critical incident, with a fire fatality, with a line of duty death, with any of these, what I call hot button issues. They're okay having some folks come out and do some peer support. If we can get in the door that way and they get a sense of who these MHPs are that are sitting in that circle, that know what they're doing, some of these guys just have to, they just say, prove it to me, prove that it works. That's how we do it. So to be visible, to be connected, to have that, the peer support plus clinician is a 1-2 punch that works. And so I think we're seeing more of that because we're seeing more peer support in a bigger geographical area than we've ever seen it before. So it's coming. It's just slow.
Well, why don't you guys talk about the peer support program you guys have going on?
Well, from the Fools aspect, word of mouth, we're told about Nancy, and it just kind of snowballed in the best way from there. Irma, we have a not-for-profit, like I told you, and we specialize in, like training for firefighters, doing things like this, getting classes for the families, and just really like holding on to that brotherhood that we all know is kind of going in the opposite direction than it should.
Mm-hmm.
And with
Yes.
being a lieutenant, right?
Yes.
I'm sure he can attest to that. So we're just trying to hold on to the traditions of the fire service and the family aspect. And with Nancy, we did a class last November called "This One's for Us," and she came in with an awesome class. Blake Stinnett from Next Rung was there, and he gave an awesome class. So again, it kind of snowballed, and the Fools is trying to put together a peer support team, not just for our members, but just for the Metro Atlanta area. And Nancy's kind of taken the reins and steered us in the right direction. So we took Nancy's class, and I think another big, I don't want to call it a stigma, but another big misconception is that you've got to be a licensed master's degree type of person to go listen. And that's what I thought. Before I knew anything about this stuff, I thought to be a counselor, a peer support provider, or a CISM team member, you had to be just this extremely educated, licensed person, which, I mean, I'm sure it helps, but I'm not that person, right? But I can listen and I can talk to people. So that's been great. And I think, Nancy, like you said, if we can't get clinicians like the two of you out there, you have us, and we can kind of bridge that gap between the people on the ground, they're beating the streets, and the clinicians.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because like take what Blake and Next Rung take what they do. They are firefighters and paramedics that walk the walk and talk the talk. Nancy, I would call you in a heartbeat because I know you, but I would call them before I called just a counselor or anybody, right?
Because they're on your level, they get it.
Right, and they're not counselors, but like you, Nancy, they have that book of people that are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to listen to someone that has walked in my shoes before someone that doesn't know anything about what I do.
And they can establish that relationship and then point you in the right direction to the professional
Right.
that can help you best, and not some random professional, but someone, like Nancy or Irma that specializes in this type of relationship.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So Nancy, and Irma, the both of you have hit the nail on the head with this. Nancy, when you and I met, it was kind of like you became like the day we met, you became like a favorite in my contact list just because like Siri's always listening to me what I'm saying, and it's just constantly, oh, you need to talk to Nancy. Call Nancy. We're using Nancy for this. Nancy's got this person, you need to call this person. So what you guys have done and are continuing to do, it's, my hat is off to you.
Well, it's, Jon, it's a hard world right now, and it's not just 2020. This is what I tell people. This is not your daddy's fire service. This is not your daddy's sheriff's office. It's, we had a son-in-law that spent 17 years in the Army, and his dad is a retired lieutenant colonel, but his dad didn't get it. He just didn't get that our son-in-law had a whole different experience of war and critical events and trauma. And I think that's the same case with public safety, is that, I constantly hear from my fire folks, the fires are hotter, deadlier, faster. You're training like crazy to try to keep up with all these innovations in building materials and things of this nature that are just deadly. And so you're facing so many things that probably no one has faced before. And so out there trying to do that job and then going home, sometimes it's oil and water. And what I tell people is what works on the street is not going to work in the kitchen at home.
Absolutely. Her and I have talked, Molly and I have talked a lot. We've had our issues, and God, we're going to have more issues, I'm sure. But something that I had to kind of beat into her head was when the first 24 hours I'm home, my body's there, but my mind isn't. I'm still trying to dial, and I call it la la land, right? For 48 hours I'm home, I'm living in this la la land where everything is good and we get a beautiful roof overhead, our kids are healthy, everything is perfect. And then for 24 hours, I have to go and potentially everything I see that day is going to be the world's worst. And so the first 24 hours I'm home, I'm not home. I'm trying to retrain my brain to get back into la la land.
We've talked about how he comes home and my issues are, the dishes or you left the garage door open again or something like that. And he has a hard time understanding my concern about these things when his concerns are so different than what I experience here at my house.
Absolutely. I see that a lot, and in my practice, and it's a relief, I think, for the first responders that come in to see me, because once they understand my background and my experience, that I'm basically married to the fire service, it really bypasses a lot of the initial getting to know them type of thing. Like I was explaining before, they don't have to explain, what tones drop means and shift change and all of these things. We can just go right into what the issue is. And I think it's just, you can see their shoulders relax when they are in my office and they're like, okay, good. I don't have to explain all that to you. You understand. And we can just go right into the issue. And you are exactly right. What you were just describing about his, your husband's issue being different than yours when he comes off shift. And that's exactly what I hone in on when I get spouses that come in to see me, because they don't know what to do with their spouse when they come home. And they just know that for 24 hours or 48 hours sometimes, that they've had to run this whole house by themselves. And, sometimes emergencies come up, a water heater goes out, you go outside and there's a broken water main, the types of things that you would expect your spouse to be there to handle. And so we're put sometimes, me included, in these situations, and I get it, where you're having to make these like executive, very expensive decisions because your spouse isn't home. And so I think, it's stressful, but like you said, it's a different type of stress, and it's understanding when your spouse comes off shift. that they need some time and they need some space, and they cannot walk into the house and immediately connect with the family and just kind of blend in. Like, they need a minute. Sometimes they need a day. Sometimes they need to come home and go to bed. Sometimes they want to be home alone, and they may say, you know, I really need everybody to leave for a little bit. But we need to be understanding of that. And again, it's not that I don't think that the spouses is that they don't care. They just don't have the information. They just don't have the education of what's needed and the types of things to look out for when your spouse does return home. When you look at their body language, are they talking or not talking? Do they look like they haven't slept? You know, did they leave their stuff in the car and they usually bring it in? You know, so it's just paying attention to those little things so you know what they need, and having a plan ahead of time as to what is this going to look like when they come home, and what should we be doing, and what type of routine should we get in to give them the space that they need so they can relax before they engage with the family.
Not to make myself sound like a victim or anybody that's a first responder coming home like they're the victim, but to me, when I come home, I expect myself to hit the ground running. If I come home and I just fall out on the floor and go to sleep, I feel like the biggest crap bag ever. And I hate that, right? I mean, you know, yesterday I got home, and it's a tradition in our house, and on weekends that I work, I go to Dunkin' and bring donuts home for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And if I didn't do that, like, I would be so disappointed in myself. And you know, I'm very lucky now. I'm at a slower station, but the last 10 years I was at one of the busiest stations in our department. And, you know, I didn't know I was tired. I didn't know how tired I was until I wasn't tired anymore. So, you know, like you said, Irma, the station I'm at now is very rural, and it's not populated. It's a small city. And I went from running 15 to 20 calls a shift to maybe 3 calls a shift. But when they call, they're calling, and it's not good. But so I'm lucky now, and I can come home and hit the ground running, and I can come home and go ride bikes and run and do all this stuff. But for the guys that can't do that, they are running the 15, 20 calls a shift. I can empathize, right? It's terrible. And I know for me, it would kill me. It would crush me if I couldn't come home and just be home. Do you think that is something that you can train yourself to be able to do, or?
Well, I think it goes back to self-care, you know, and I'm not saying every time a spouse comes home, you know, they need to be babied or anything like that by any means.
Right.
But, you know, there might be a situation that comes up where they had a traumatic call and they're not their usual self. And that's the kind of things I would hone in on as far as giving them that time and space. But as it relates to your off days, you know, there really needs to be an approach into giving time for yourself. Just saying, you know what, if you like to go fishing, if you like to go hiking, if you like to go shooting, you know, if you like to play golf, or either you and some friends or you alone are doing something together as a family, it's just important that on those off days, if you're able to, take advantage of those and do some things that you enjoy, like kind of re-engage with life because you're not on shift. And I know sometimes that's hard to do. And I know for me personally, like back when I was an EMT, my territory was actually in the vicinity of where I lived at. I don't advise that. It was really hard because the only way I can describe it, and you will probably get what I'm saying, is when I was on shift and I was in my area, it was almost like I was in another world or another dimension, because you saw things that as a regular citizen, you had no idea was going on around you. So, you know, that's why it's so important when you are off shift to find some things to do. And if it's getting away or out of the area, or you happen to work, you know, where you live, you want to go, you know, get some fun things going on with your family and do some things for you. And I think a lot of my people that come in, they're tired when they get to me. You know, they're been doing this for a long time. They've never talked to anyone before about it. Their marriage isn't doing very well, and they're burnt out, you know. And one of the first things I asked is I'm like, what are your hobbies? And they kind of look at me like, what are you talking about hobbies? Like, that's not why I'm sitting here. Like, do you have anything you do for yourself? And more times than not, they don't. And that's one area that you can retrain yourself, like you were saying, and start looking at that and start finding some things that you can do for you, in addition to doing things with your family and re-engaging in that aspect.
Hobbies.
There's so many people. I didn't realize how common it was. There's so many people who work 48-hour shifts. That's their second job. So to come home, and home is not even the majority of their time. Home is like a third of their life.
Yes.
That would be extremely hard to cope with. Like, Jon started doing leather a few years ago. He makes like leather radio straps and stuff. And the main reason for that was so he could come home and he could work. His second job would be at home, and he would be able to make his own schedule. And if the kids and I needed him or wanted him to be somewhere, he didn't have to deal with a second job. He made his own schedule in that way. And he makes leather in our basement, like it's at home. But for someone who is literally at home a third of their life, it would be hard to establish any kind of like personal time.
We did it for a while. I worked for Roswell Fire.
That was horrible. And that was before kids.
Yeah. No, we had Maddox. Because I quit because you got pregnant with Monroe.
That's right.
So, when you're young and, you're a young man with no obligations and no wife and kids or husband and kids, whatever. Sure. Go get some experience. Go, get your butt kicked for a couple of years. Why not? Obviously make sure you're healthy and you're keeping up with yourself. But anybody that's been doing this longer than 5 years, I would just tell them not to do it. I talk to these guys all the time. They're like, man, I'm going to apply here and go work 48s, and no, it won't be that bad. I only have to do this many shifts. And it's like, man, I'm telling you, I don't care if it's one shift a month. It is the worst thing you can do. It is terrible. Right. I get it. If you're saving up for a vacation, you pick up some overtime. You want to get a gift for kids, pick up some overtime. But to have that obligation, it crushed me, let alone every time I talked to her, it was, her being by herself. And I'll never forget it. I was on the ambulance driving back from the hospital, and we were having a totally normal conversation, laughing, cutting up, and it got silent. And Molly said, when you come home, you ruin everything. And I was kind of like, you were pregnant.
God.
And your hormones are crazy. But I was just kind of like, okay. She said, I don't know how else to say it. When you get home, we've built this routine, and you come home, and I don't know how else to say it, but you ruined that routine. You're not part of our routine anymore. And I think like 2 days later, I quit. It's just not. I would much rather be broke with my family than have a little bit extra money and never see my wife or kids.
Right.
And I would tell that to anybody. Go cut grass. Go clean pools.
Right.
Get a 9 to 5. My wife and kids are way, way, way too important.
And if you can do that, it's fabulous if you can do it. But we all know that COVID has thrown so many wrenches into so many things. And what I'm coming up against now with people is the 48s are not voluntary. They're mandatory because you've got people out on quarantine. That
was a thing.
Yeah, the schedule mandatory callbacks for us.
Wow.
They were implemented, that we never had to, but they were like, it's a thing. Just don't be mad if we have to call you until you can't leave.
I would imagine like the big departments like City of Atlanta and stuff are having to implement that though. Wow. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. If you don't have the personnel, you can't do a one-person truck. You've got to be able to get them. And the problem is you can't borrow from other agencies, as is sometimes the case where somebody can swap shifts out. Everybody's got quarantine issues, and you could have an entire shift decimated.
Yeah, and that's common.
Yes.
Because the symptoms aren't your most contagious 48 hours before symptoms show.
Right.
Get sick, and they're like, well, crap, you were here for the last 2 shifts.
You've exposed your whole crew.
So then the whole crew goes out.
Then you have to worry about family. Am I taking it home to them?
Right.
Wow. Nancy, earlier, I think before we were on mic, you were talking about the difference in peer support now during 2020 and during COVID. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that we've got to do a change of thought as far as the long-term help with peers. The foundation of it is that you get to know another person that does your job. You get to know them in a way that is a deeper emotional level than normal. The peer training is giving you the education and the knowledge to reach somebody on that emotional level that doesn't bring you down with it or doesn't make you want to fix. The hardest part with peer support in public safety is, number one, your rescue rangers, and number two, your fixers. And you don't like wallowing, or what you might think of as wallowing in something without actually having a solution. Well, I think COVID, if we can say anything positive about this horrible thing, is making us change our thinking to, we have to be solution focused going in the door.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've got to be able to hit it, focus on it. What's your main thing right now? What can we do to impact that? There's 5 areas when we talk about substance abuse where that person's life is impacted. And those 5 areas are physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual. And when somebody's got some impact in all 5 of those domains, they're in trouble. If they've got impact in one, might be able to, make a difference there. And that's why, Irma and I always preach, come in early. Even if you think it's not that big a deal, come in and start getting that coaching and getting that help and getting that strategy to get something done with that. So I think the peers have to be able to do that as well. To sit down with somebody who's had a critical incident is important. It's important to work through the incident, but the much greater piece is, what do we need to give them for help on the long term here? Because impacting now on this level here will help them cope, will help them with that self-care, will help them be healthier mentally and physically and emotionally down the road. What do we need to do to make that happen? Start that process today. I think that's where our shift is going to be. And clinically, I think, Irma, we may not see them for the whole sessions because maybe they won't need them. Maybe they get that quick, fix or answer or whatever, and they're able to go off and take care of it themselves.
Right. And I've had that happen. And then they've called me later to check in, which has been great, so.
Yeah, the follow-up is key. Follow-up is key. Having that safety net, and even with the peers. And so, Jon, if you went out to talk to someone who had a bad call and you find out that they're about to get foreclosed on their house, we've got another issue that probably is going to impact the family on a greater level. So, yeah, we can work through the critical incident and we can do that stuff on the peer side. But what do we need to do? We need to get them some financial help. And so let's start getting that ball rolling. Maybe we need to do a GoFundMe. Maybe we need to, have the guys just pitch in and throw some stuff in a jar, whatever it takes. So the key here too is also, we've got to impact the suicide issue. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road there as well. Because if you have a critical incident on top of something else, on top of something, like Irma was saying, those layers, those cumulative layers, it's hard to dig out. It's hard to dig out. I had a client once that was depressed, and he said, the best description I can give you of depression is, I'm so low I have to look up to see my butt. And that, I still remember that to this day. What a desperate, horrible place for anyone to be, because you don't see a way out. If we can offer that little pinpoint of light, normalize. That's a big deal about peer support. Normalize. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not stupid. Let's deal with what you've got, and let's get some help on that level, and hope the rest of the dominoes will fall into place.
Sure. Listening to the both of you talk, Irma, you talked about stacking, right? And I feel like as a provider, would it be safe to say that a lot of times when patients come to see you guys are already behind the 8 ball? Because as a first responder, I'm a handler, I'm a solver, and I don't need somebody else to tell me how I do and don't do things. So when I do make that final decision, like, all right, I need some help, I'm a year in to feeling this way, and you guys have got to peel back every single layer. That's got to be so tough. That's got to be really, really hard to do. Because I know, I had a bout of anxiety and depression for about a year, and it wasn't probably for the 4 months into it, I didn't even tell her. I was just terrified. I didn't know. And I didn't know what to do or how she would react. Or my first thought was, well, she's going to see me as weak and I'm going to lose my job. So I just better figure out how to work through this. And so, I mean, it was the second I said, Mom, I think I have anxiety and depression. She was just kind of like, well, let's get help. I mean, I wasn't fixed, obviously, but I felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. But talking to that counselor, she was like, I see this all too often. People in your line of work come in and they are a year, 2 years, 3 years, 20 years into feeling this way before they get help. And Nancy, like you said, it's if I can provide you with that pinpoint of light, if I can give you a direction, that is all that person needs a lot of the time. So I couldn't agree more. Something I really want to talk about is the awareness. And we've done I think everybody has done a great job of awareness. But how do we take from awareness to implementation? What are some of the things that we can do to say, all right, everybody knows that PTSD and mental health and depression and suicide and anxiety are real things. We all know that. Now what do we do? Something that I touched on earlier was having a clinician or a provider in the stations at headquarters, not just a number on a card, not just a referral. Nancy, like you and I talked about a couple of days ago, is, the departments nowadays put so much emphasis on physical strength and lie detectors and all this stuff. But the extent of a psychological evaluation is you go take a test and you talk to someone you've never met and don't know from Adam for 40 minutes. And then they're the ones that decide whether or not you're crazy. And I say that they don't decide whether or not you're crazy, but whether you're suitable to do this job. And that's asinine to me. I think it's a waste of money. It's a waste of a lot of money. I think that we could take that money and implement it into something so much more productive and reoccurring than a one-time person saying, well, I think that you like to burn things, so you're not going to get this job. So I think that if we could get a clinician in my department and implement that face in the stations and in headquarters and ride-alongs with some of the supervisors and battalion chiefs, I think that would be so incredible and beneficial for everybody. And it would give you guys clout, right? So when you go to these other departments, you can say, listen, I'm not just someone who's read a book. I've been on these calls. I've seen the faces. I've seen the emotions. I've seen the families. I know how this works.
Well, yeah, like Nancy and Irma, you guys already have that experience.
Right. Excuse me, right.
But to make that y'all's experience and how proficient you guys are in this niche, to make that universal with a lot of counselors and a lot of professionals, that would be ideal.
Definitely.
Well, let me give a shout out to my buddy, Captain Mark Makowski.
He's the man.
He's amazing. He's an Alpharetta firefighter, heart of a counselor, just a great guy. And I learned that last year he went down to Miami-Dade to participate in a statewide program for clinician awareness. There were 50 to 100 mental health professionals already licensed who had no experience with public safety at all, but were interested in finding out more, were invited to participate in a 2-day intensive, immersive training on the fire service. They were issued turnout gear. They went through the burn house. They slept in the stations. They did ride-alongs.
That's incredible.
Totally immersive. Learned the lingo. And there's a lot of accountability for them. They have the 2-day, and then they have to have like follow-up ride-alongs where they're, proving that they're still learning. After a certain period of time, whatever their requirements are, they are then assigned to the critical incident stress management team in their area as the mental health professional. They automatically have credibility. They already have everything they need to embed with those teams. and that's who they stay with. So the goal for Florida was to have each and every county have its own team with its own trained mental health professional. Now it's the fireside, but Mark got to thinking that maybe we need to do something here. So COVID being what it is, my fingers are crossed, and I think Mark would be okay with me talking about this, that this November, in another month or so, he wanted to put a 3-day together for us in the metro area to participate on that mental health awareness program.
Awareness class, right?
So we are hoping that will come to fruition, and I'm hoping to be a part of that, and maybe Irma and some of my other vetted folks can be there as well to help these clinicians, because what you have to do is you also have to weed out. There are some people that cannot take this. And I think what Florida is doing is making sure that the ones who do successfully come through it and feel good about it are the ones you want. If you have someone that hears a call or something and gets very emotional, and you want to watch that too, because you want to counsel that person and say, this may not be for you. You might want to consider working with a different population. So not only do we need training, we've got to also be careful to make sure that the ones we do have on those front lines want to be there, are trained to be there, are confident they can do it, and are actually going to make a difference with these folks and their families.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, Mark is a phenomenal dude. He's a member of the Fools and kind of geared me to you, Nancy. But he came by the house the other day, and he and I stood in the driveway probably 45 minutes to an hour and just talked. And he's got a good story. He's a really good guy.
Mm-hmm.
So Irma, what do you, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need you, right? We wouldn't need your services, to be honest. But what are some of the obstacles that you face as far as getting patients and the stigma? What are some of the things, the apprehension you see your patients have about coming to you?
Well, the biggest thing is they're scared that the department's going to find out. So I do have to spend a little bit of time reassuring them that they're not going to find out. That's really the number one thing. And the other thing too is I think as they get to know me and they get more comfortable, they share more. So, and this is just in counseling in general, is someone will usually come in for one issue, but there's like 5 other issues going on, and it might not be that may be the one that prompted them to call, but this one over here might be actually bigger. So, it's just figuring that out and getting them comfortable enough to share this information and just building that trust. Again, for me, the trust piece, well, I guess I would say 95% of the time, it's easy for me to build up the trust just because of my experience, and understanding the job. There is a 5% population though that goes, well, wait a second, who do you know? And do you share this information with your husband? And, and I get that, which is totally legitimate, because I could see where they would be like, everyone kind of knows everybody. So I have had one actually have a concern about that. And so we talked about that, and I was like, well, this is my job. I could lose my license, if I share information, not that I would, but it is a legitimate concern. So we address that if it comes up. But that, I would say that's my number one thing. And the other thing that happens as well is that I see occur is when, most of the time they're not sleeping well. Sometimes things will kind of like trigger emotions for them, or numbness, they could be numb. And I think the relief that comes upon their face is due to the fact that I say, hey, like what you're telling me, what you've been through, that's normal. And, normalizing what they're feeling and what they're going through and how they're behaving really seems to help, because they're like, okay, so I'm not crazy. No, you're not crazy. Perfectly normal that you're losing sleep, perfectly normal that you're not eating well. All of those things are normal, and then I have to gauge, of course, well, how long has this been going on, and all of that. But normalizing a lot of their symptoms, I think, seems to help, because they're scared to tell me. They're scared that I'm going to, that there's going to be somebody with a white coat waiting for them when they leave, and they're going to be sent away and have to go to, mental health ward or something.
That's what I felt when I went to see the counselor. I mean, everything. I was clueless, and I was terrified by the end of it that she was going to be like, "You're a lost cause. You're going to the hospital." And I was terrified, and I had convinced myself that I was crazy. I had sat on it for months and was just like, "Man, I'm just messed up in the head. I'm just done."
Well, and what you said when you were going through it was the people that Jon has seen with mental illness are people at their very worst, where they're calling the fire department or the ambulance in order to care for these people. So his idea of mental illness was never, anxiety and depression. It was
the manic depressive, the schizophrenic, just the worst of the worst. And in my head, that's where I was headed. Like,
right.
What was the tipping point where these people became, manic and just in a bad place?
What's separating where you are to where they are? Where is that middle ground, and what, like you said, the tipping point? And again, I think awareness, I think talking about these things, and even in rookie school, like talking about, hey, you're going to have these feelings, you're going to see these things, and it's not going to sit well in your human brain. Like, those things are, I think, so important that everyone needs to be talking about, and hearing guys like Jon who have been on the job for 10 years, like, hey dude, I've gone through this. I've had to see a counselor. Like, normalizing it, exposure, talking about it. I think all of these things, and like Nancy said, it's just a slow, progressive thing that's going to happen, hopefully organically. I think a lot of it is generational. My dad was a firefighter, and I've talked about how it's so different. I never knew if it was, like, my dad never talked about calls. Like, he came home and he didn't really talk about work at all. And I didn't know if it was because I'm a wife to Jon, so he talks to me a lot more than my dad obviously would, or the more we talk, the more I learn. I think it is more generational. He's just one of those, like, hard ass, muscle through it kind of guys. And Jon likes to come home and talk about what he saw, and not necessarily everything with me. But it's more of a conversation than put it in the back of your head until next shift.
Right.
Well, her and I have had a lot of talks about coming home and telling her about calls, and we don't always run the blood, guts, and gore in the crazy calls. We have the non-shit, Irma, we have the toe pain and the headache. But I would never want my family to see some of the things that I've seen. And I'm not this old salt that has been there and done that, but I've seen some really shitty stuff. Mm-hmm. I would never want my family to experience that. But she's the first person I want to come home and talk to.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I can only imagine, Irma, with what you specialize in, that secondary trauma from the spouses, the people that don't run the calls and ride the trucks and do this stuff, and that their firefighter or paramedic or police officer come home and they got to spill the beans. They got to talk, and that can rattle people. I know that if I didn't have the experiences I had and somebody came to me and told me some of my stories, I'd be like, oh my God, like, that really happens? Yeah.
Like, I've told Jon he's told me a handful of like bad calls, and he always prefaces it like, okay, this one was a bad one, but I just have to tell you and get it off my chest. I won't go into details, but like, I've told him all of the vision in my head is always like cartoon, because I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen death, or I've never seen any of that. So it's also foreign in my brain that it's literally the vision I have of these calls is like in cartoon form in my brain. So yeah, like you said, the secondary trauma and the spouses coming in and talking about things like that, I can see how that would be a huge need for counselors.
Normalizing.
Normalizing it.
Right. Well, and that's also too where I think what would be great, how I would always envision this to look would be when we get new hires anywhere, and we've got the new hires going through their classes. If they have a spouse, I think the spouse needs to be there and going through a class as well, because they really need an understanding of what they've just signed up for. They need, not after the fact, not when the bad stuff happens, not when you look at your calendar and realize, oh my gosh, they're working on Christmas. What am I going to do with the kids and all of that? But just a heads up, like these are the things that are going to happen. These are the things you're going to face. These are people that are going to be asking you about your spouse's job and want to call you because they saw sirens and they want to know if they were on the call. That's happened to me, and they don't like it when I say, well, I don't know if he was there. And even if he was there, I don't know what's going on. Oh, you know what's going on, just that kind of stuff. Or just, where's your husband or where's your wife? They're not here again. And you're at some after school activity for a child. So it's just, I think if we could have something available to the families would be amazing, because we set them up for success that way. We're not coming in the back end because now there's already an issue and they hate the job now, the spouse doesn't want them working there and all of that. I think it would really, really save some marriages.
I totally agree. And we've lost a couple people recently because spouses are just, I'm not going to lie. If you came to me tomorrow and said, I want you to quit, I would quit. I just would. And I don't hold that against anybody that makes that decision. It's not easy. And you throw kids in there and, it's hard enough when they're babies, but then they get to the age where they can beg you not to go to work. And that throws a whole nother heartache and wrench in there. So I think that you're exactly right. And that's why, Irma, I think on the 7th, we're going to hopefully get the both of you out for an event with the Fools. So like you said, just let people know, and I'm definitely going to talk to our training department about, I'd like to get the both of you out there, but Irma, especially you, just, you don't have to throw the smart words around. Just say, hey, it's going to suck sometimes. It's going to be tough, but, make friends with the other wives, make your circle that much bigger.
Right.
But I agree. Recruit schools, it's got to start there. When I went through recruit school, none of this was even remotely thought about. None of this was talked about. None of this was a thing. The mentality was absolutely, you just beat sand until you get over it.
Yeah.
And the EAP was a thing, but nobody knew the number. Nobody knew who ran it. Nobody who knew how to contact them. And I still think that's a thing now. I would have to call a good friend of mine at headquarters to get our EAP number. I know our chaplains, but I've never met anybody, and that's to no fault of anybody. It's just a broken system, or an underdeveloped system, I guess.
That's a better word.
So my hopes is, through the Fools and through this and working with the two of you, and the CISM and peer support stuff, that we can absolutely implement this stuff. That is my goal, because being in that dark place is terrible. That's the worst I've ever felt my entire life. And I would wish it upon nobody. So that's my goal.
Agreed. And I think, our goal as clinicians is getting them to a healthy retirement. That's the thing. We need to go healthy into our retirement. We need to have a plan to stay healthy throughout. And I know it's getting better. There's so much emphasis now on firefighter cancer, and the research and the testing and the screening, and those things are coming to light now. So we're looking at the physical health piece as a fairly, very legitimate thing to do. What about the mental and emotional? My thing is, if there's somebody driving a $500,000 rig, and you spent $500,000 on a piece of equipment, what are you spending on the driver? What's the important part of that piece of equipment?
Absolutely.
If your people are not healthy, you're going to have on the job stuff. And we are way wanting to be proactive. We want to jump in on the front of this thing, like with recruits, with retreats, with anything family, a family day where you just get out and run around and kids play, and informal get-togethers like you guys are doing is fabulous. The Fools are just, you're hitting on all the cylinders that need to be hit, and you're legitimized because they know who you are. There's already a trust with you. So as we build these networks of trust where each person can say to the other, hey, go see him, go see her. Word of mouth. I think that's probably, Irma, isn't that most of what you're getting now for referrals?
I am, because people are asking for help, and they're talking to their coworkers, and they're slipping on my number, and they're saying, hey, this person from this department, gave me this number. I'm friends with them. They live in my neighborhood. We work 2 different departments. Okay, and so they come on in. So I think that has helped as well, as I finish up with some of these people, and they're comfortable talking about, going out there and saying, yeah, I had to go see somebody. And then privately, someone will go ask them later, well, who did you go see? Can I have that number? And they call me, and I think it's great. So I think it is happening, and they are talking. It's just, we just have to continue moving forward and get this out there so we can get everyone the help that they need and stay on the front end of this instead of on the back end.
Absolutely. 100%. Well, before we go, I just want to thank you guys very much.
You guys are amazing.
Yeah, thank you for what you guys do. And if we can do anything to help, we are more than happy to help you.
We'll put all of your contact information on the links that on the podcast and on the YouTube link as well, so people know how to get in touch with you. And then, everyone who's listening, you can reach out to us. We can help you try to get in touch with someone closer to you if Nancy and Irma are not in your vicinity. We'll do everything we can to try to help.
And we can telehealth. Always remember that, we have this ability. We have platforms that are completely safe. And so it's not optimal. I'd rather see somebody in person. But if Irma's the perfect person for somebody and they're in Gwinnett County, we can make it happen. I mean, it's really the linkage and the connection that's key. And I appreciate you guys so much for what you're doing and putting the word out and having these great, just great conversations with people all over the place doing wonderful things in the fire service. And like I tell people, you say we're great. I say I'm selfish because my goal is to keep you healthy so I can sleep at night. I won't have a crazy firefighter trying to put a house fire out that he doesn't know what he's doing. So it's all about me. Just saying.
I'm number one in my life. You guys are one of yours. It's all about me.
Yeah. But thank you all. Thank you both. This is so great what you're doing.
It was our pleasure. Irma, it was a pleasure meeting you. And I hope we can meet soon. The 7th.
Yes.
12 to 6 is what we're slated. How long was your class? I mean, you have a class, correct? You have a little presentation and stuff.
Oh, I have something. I've had it sitting for a couple years waiting for this, so I will pull that out.
How long do you think it'll be?
Look it over. I'm sorry.
How long do you think it'll be?
I'd say about an hour.
Perfect. Okay. Well, good deal. Thank you. And again, anything we can do to help, let us know, and we'll chat soon.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me, and it was so great to meet y'all.
Wonderful.
You as well.
Thank you.
Love you, ladies. Thank you.
See ya.